Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this legislature had a great debate last week with respect to the future of the Senate, and there were a number of different views expressed eloquently, I think, on both sides of the House. Mr. Speaker, I think we saw this facility, this room, being used for its purpose, and it has many intended purposes, but certainly that kind of debate is one of them. And we came to a conclusion, Mr. Speaker, as a result of that debate, and we're able to send a message not only on behalf of the people of Saskatchewan and to the people of Saskatchewan, but indeed to the rest of the country, as Canada was a little bit interested, at least in what we had to say that day. Mr. Speaker, we have the chance to do that again. And I want to urge members, I'm going to move a motion at the end of my brief remarks, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the proposed trade deal between our country and the European Union. I'm going to urge that this House strongly support, in principle, the comprehensive economic and trade agreement reached by the Government of Canada and the European Union, Mr. Speaker, and the motion will be, there's a bit more detail, but not much to it. Mr. Speaker, last month we were very pleased, certainly on this side of the House, and I hope, I'm guessing also members on that side of the House, were very pleased to hear that the federal government had successfully concluded the negotiations on a trade agreement with the European Union known as CETA. Mr. Speaker, on this occasion, it's worth thanking the Prime Minister. He was very much hands-on in this particular file, as was Minister Ed Fast, who I think has worked the trade file very well on behalf of the Dominion of Canada, on behalf of our economic interests, and I think they both deserve some congratulation, because it's no easy proposition, Mr. Speaker, for a federation to negotiate a trade deal with a European Union. There's a lot of moving parts there. Mr. Speaker, within our country, we had the federal government checking with the provincial governments on our position on certain issues. And some governments were, at times, less excited about certain parts of the trade deal than other parts. And, Mr. Speaker, for our part, I would like to put it on the record, the province of Saskatchewan worked to be a force for good, worked to be very constructive. We, in fact, Mr. Speaker, were encouraging other provinces, and there would be a mutual encouragement on either side. But it was a difficult thing to herd all of us cats, so to speak, for a federal government. The same, I'm sure, would be true for the negotiators on the European Union side. And so, Mr. Speaker, it's no small feat at all that we would now be debating the agreement in principle that has been reached between Canada and between the European Union, and we acknowledge the leadership on both sides of that, and our Canadian leadership, Mr. Speaker, in this regard. It was interesting to see the response in our country to the agreement in principle, especially for those of us who followed closely the free trade debate of 1988 and then the subsequent debate around NAFTA, which moved to take the Canada-U.S. free trade deal to the rest of North America. Mr. Speaker, I remember I was involved in that debate as a young person. A number of us who believed that this free trade agreement would be good, Mr. Speaker, based on some research we had done, decided to form something called the Alliance for the Future of Young Canadians, and I was happy and honoured to be the Western co-chair of that, and we tried to insert ourselves into the debate. We noted that both sides, those who opposed free trade with the United States, those who were in favour of free trade, were invoking young people. They invoked the next generation for their position, and so we thought maybe the country should hear from the next generation, from younger people in the debate, and that's why we formed this particular alliance. But I also remember that, it was actually my first occasion to meet Glenn Anderson, actually, from the Edmonton Oilers, because he turned out to be a free trader and joined us at a press event we had in Toronto. And so there was a little bit of talk about free trade, but mostly a lot of questions about Wayne Gretzky. Mr. Speaker, there were other highlights that I recall during that debate, including the vitriol on the side of the debate opposing free trade. Mr. Speaker, the scenarios that were painted by those on the left, principally in the country, and they would have been the New Democratic Party here provincially and federally, and unions, and Maud Barlow and the Council of Canadians, and any number of folks that you can think of. The vitriol, the opposition to free trade, Mr. Speaker, was borderline hyperbolic. There was no question about it. They said we would lose our culture if we free traded with the Americans, later the Mexicans as well, that we would lose our national identity. Maybe the rules for hockey would change, Mr. Speaker. I remember the commercial that was run in the campaign on free trade where, I think we all remember, where that hand erases the border between the United States and Canada. Mr. Speaker, the fear-mongering was at an epic level. People were scaring Canadians about that we would lose our country, that we would lose our identity if we were to enter into this agreement. Those who supported free trade thought a little differently, Those who supported free trade believed in the ability of our farmers and our business people and Canadians in general to compete with anyone in the world if the level playing field was right. And moreover, those who supported free trade understood with some clarity that a country of then probably about 26, 27 million people, as vast as Canada is, with all of its natural resources, needed to trade. That our country, maybe more than most on the earth, needs to trade and needs to methodically remove barriers to our trade, needs to move to freer trade. And so there was quite a debate that shaped up between both sides. Mr. Speaker, well, what happened? Now I think we're some distance away from 1988, at least it feels like that for me, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's probably a good time to pause then and evaluate the free trade agreement we had in North America as we evaluate the agreement in principle we have with the European Union. Well, as near as I can tell, the Canadian identity is as strong as it ever was, Mr. Speaker. And frankly, I think the Canadian culture is stronger than it was before, in part at least because our economy is stronger than it was prior to free trade. That's not to say that the agreement is perfect. These agreements are simply not. They're imperfect instruments. It's why you have to spell out binding dispute mechanisms within an agreement. It's why that BDM was linchpin in that particular agreement in the first place, Mr. Speaker. And sometimes the binding dispute mechanism doesn't even work, and then you go to the World Trade Organization, and the Minister of Agriculture will know this well, as we've done that as a country over the country of origin labeling and agriculture. And sometimes you lose it, or you win at the WTO, and the country that has lost, the United States in this case, continues on with this non-tariff trade barrier. And so, Mr. Speaker, then the federal government, with the support of our province and others, has to consider retaliation. Free trade agreements do not mean that the relationship's going to be perfect, that there are not going to be these disputes. But, Mr. Speaker, here are the economic results of free trade in North America. Since the free trade agreement, Canada's GDP has risen by more than $1 trillion. Wow. Two-way trade with the United States has more than tripled. Two-way trade with the United States has now surpassed $740 billion, equivalent to 41% of the GDP of our country. Saskatchewan's two-way trade with the United States has jumped more than 900% since 1988, from $3.2 billion to $29.5 billion. Foreign direct investment in Canada by U.S. investors has more than tripled, Mr. Speaker. And all the while, our identity is intact, our culture is strong, and the rules for hockey haven't changed. Well, they've changed, but not because of free trade, Mr. Speaker. I think they changed because of the trap, probably more so than free trade. Mr. Speaker, it's an important context then for us to consider CETA, for us to consider why the response to CETA has been as positive as it has been, with the Liberal Party of Canada supporting in principle CETA, with the NDP, the official opposition in Ottawa, not really supporting CETA but not opposing it as they would have in 1988, certainly. Mr. Speaker, here's the good news. And we can debate this in principle motion today because there's a lot of specifics available to all of us about what CETA will mean to Canada and specifically to our province. Under CETA, approximately 98% of all tariffs will be eliminated, opening up new opportunities for our exporters. New opportunities in a large, lucrative market, Mr. Speaker. The EU has a population of 500 million and a GDP of $17 trillion. Mr. Speaker, right now, the EU is not Canada's #1 customer, even combined as all those countries. That's the United States, quite clearly. But it is the second largest customer for Canada and the third largest customer for our province, though it only accounts for 4% of exports. Mr. Speaker, it is, though, the world's largest importer of agricultural and agri-food products. That should get our attention here in Saskatchewan. The EU imports 130 billion of these imported 130 billion of these products in 2012. So, Mr. Speaker, what does it mean to Saskatchewan farmers? What would the EU mean to agriculture in the province? It means EU tariffs will be eliminated on oats, where the EU tariff can be up to $114 a ton. Eliminated on barley and rye, where tariffs of up to $120 a ton can exist. Eliminated on spring wheat, where tariffs of up to $122 a ton will receive now permanent duty-free access, Mr. Speaker. Also permanent duty-free access for durum, where tariffs can exist up to $190 a ton. Processed goods and processed pulses and grains, Mr. Speaker, the tariff is eliminated under this deal. In addition, Mr. Speaker, 100,000 tons of low to medium quality Canadian wheat will receive immediate duty-free and quota market access. CETA will mean better market access for livestock producers. I think the Canadian Cattlemen's Association have estimated about a $600 million additional market now for Canadian beef as a result of this particular deal. Annual duty-free access will now be available because of the deal for up to 80,000 tons of pork from our country, for up to 50,000 tons of beef. Remember, we have the second largest beef herd in the country, Mr. Speaker, in our province. 3,000 tons of bison, Mr. Speaker, and 15,000 tons of high-quality beef under the existing Hilton quota. And, Mr. Speaker, it's worth noting that Americans will still face a 20% duty with respect to this product. Mr. Speaker, $1.3 billion in additional sales of agricultural product from our country into the EU, that's going to be good for our province, because we have about 40% of the arable acres in the country. We do have the second largest beef herd in Canada. We have, Mr. Speaker, agricultural production, pick a crop that is prodigious, that is prolific, Mr. Speaker, and that actually has world standing. When we talk about our exports in any given agricultural product, it could be pulses, it could be its grains and oil seeds. We'll give a large percentage. You'll hear me do it, and others will speak about this. It will be 17%, 30%, 35%. When we do that, Mr. Speaker, in this province about an agricultural commodity, we're talking about a percentage of world exports, not of Canadian exports. So, Mr. Speaker, as a province whose economy is increasingly and happily looking to agriculture to drive consistent growth. A third of our exports last year were agricultural exports, and remember, our exports broke a record. In a province like that, more access, better access is important. And so I noted in the introduction that Mr. Holbach, one of the members of Parliament, is here and was thanked, as were members of our caucus. That's why the Conservative caucus members, I think, were working so hard to encourage this deal. It's why our government was working hard for it as well. If all that CETA offered to our province was its agricultural access, it would be worth a hearty endorsement from this legislature, Mr. Speaker, but there's more, because we talk about a reduction in 98% of the tariffs that Canadian goods face, and certainly we move short-line equipment, we move other products into that particular market that will benefit from CETA. But here's one more thing that has not got a lot of attention, and that should have ours in terms of a benefit of CETA. It's something we actually, as a province, put on the table together with our federal colleagues. We thought it might be of interest to Europe, Mr. Speaker, and what I'm talking about is the non-resident ownership provisions, which are really restrictions imposed by the federal government, as they have been for years by successive governments, on foreign investment into the uranium industry. It is true today that foreign companies can invest in uranium industry in Saskatchewan, but they cannot own more than a 50% share in a mine. They need a majority partner that is Canadian. Mr. Speaker, we have asked the federal government for some relief on this, because we know there's interest out there. In our province today, we have a good corporate citizen. It's actually a state-owned company from France called Areva. I think that they've long advocated for this change, and in the event that one day they'd like to own more than 50% of a mine, that they'd like to have a majority interest or maybe an outright ownership on a greenfield project down the road. Mr. Speaker, there are other companies that are interested that would be affected by this, who are EU members or most favoured nation status of the EU, and they would get some reprieve here as well, like Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto has invested heavily in the province when they bought out a play known as, we call it the Rough Rider play. I'm sure it has a more technical term. It's one of the richest uranium plays in the world. Rio Tinto is not yet developing it and has told our government, when we've been to London to see them, when they've been here to meet with us, that they'd like to pursue a new mine, but they're not interested in a partner. Why wouldn't we want a company like Rio? If Rio Tinto can invest in a potash mine here, which they could certainly do, and own it outright, why in the world would we want to stop them from investing in uranium? Why would we want to stop investment dollars in uranium, Mr. Speaker, when we know it's a unique advantage here in Saskatchewan, a province that produces about 17% of the world's uranium and has this great resource? So we said to our federal government, we would like this to be gone. Maybe this could be part of the agreement. And again, to the credit of the federal government, they did include it in the agreement. The non-resident ownership provisions as regards companies who are headquartered in EU countries, or my understanding is who have in countries that have most favoured nation status, Mr. Speaker, are now going to be eligible to invest in uranium mining in the province and own a project outright. When you combine that, Mr. Speaker, with now new market access in China because of the nuclear cooperation agreement the federal government has negotiated there, nuclear cooperation agreement in India, the two most robust civilian nuclear power markets in the world, when you combine the NROP removal for European countries anyway, the NCAs in both China and India, and, Mr. Speaker, royalty reductions in the Minister of Finance's last budget so that our uranium royalties are competitive with the rest of the world, I think the long-term future is very bright for the uranium industry, and here's why that should matter to us in the legislature. There are jobs involved, obviously. There's investment at stake, obviously. But, Mr. Speaker, we also know this, that Cameco, for example, other uranium mining operations in this province have one of the best records, not perfect, but one of the best records in terms of hiring First Nations and Métis people. I think over 40%. Over 40% of the largest uranium mining company in the world, 40% of their frontline workforce, good careers in mining, Mr. Speaker, good paying jobs, difficult work, but good paying jobs and careers indeed. Over 40% are First Nations and Métis, Mr. Speaker. So others want to speak, and I want to make room for them. But, Mr. Speaker, for these two reasons alone, and there are others, for agriculture and for mining, we are strongly supportive of what the federal government has done here. And we encourage the provincial opposition, who have had courage, actually, to stand up to their federal counterparts, and I credit them for doing this, on a number of issues. On Keystone is one of them, and very recently, based on the member for Athabasca's speech on fracking, for example. We encourage them to take another opportunity to do this, because there's a bit of ambivalence, or at least confusion, on the part of the official opposition in Ottawa on their position with respect to the CETA deal. You know, there's been MPs from Newfoundland and Labrador say they basically are very concerned about what it'll do to the Newfoundland fishery, even though the unions in the fishery have been supportive. We've heard their position on Keystone, for example, which is not related directly to the CETA, obviously, but it's about energy trade, certainly. And, Mr. Speaker, I would note this. Linda McQuaig, who's the NDP's candidate in the November 25th Toronto Centre by-election, said this a few years back. She wrote that it is, quote, mythology that Canada has benefited from NAFTA. She went on to say, quote, NAFTA has done much to erode our sovereignty. It's that same old song, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't true in 1988. It's not true today. She says it's denying us control over our own energy resources. Mr. Speaker, take a look at what happened in the potash takeover. I think we do have control over our resources in this province. She said it creating a wide-ranging set of rights for corporations and limiting our powers to protect the environment and shape public programs. Wrong, wrong, wrong. But now, Mr. Speaker, this is a star candidate for the New Democratic Party. So I am concerned about the position of our federal New Democratic Party, and I encourage all of us to send a strong message from this legislature. I encourage the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite to say there is lots of specificity here in terms of agriculture, in terms of uranium mining. Surely enough for this legislature to stand up and say, we support in principle CETA. We know that Saskatchewan, when we have a chance to trade freely and without barriers that are non-tariff barriers, we know that our farmers and our businesses will succeed, will compete effectively with anyone else in the world. Given that level playing field, Mr. Speaker, we have a chance to level it for the first time with the European Union nations. Let's send a message from this legislature, a unanimous message that it should be leveled and that we support CETA and its conclusion, Mr. Speaker, to the benefit of the country. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that this House supports the agreement in principle for the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement reached by the Government of Canada and European Union, and calls on all federal parties to support the swift implementation of the agreement. Hear, hear. Hear, hear.